16. So I was put on a pump pretty quickly after my diagnosis, I think within like 6 or 9 months. And yeah, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, of course, it was like so hard. That being said, I had lost 80 pounds in 11 and a half weeks. So I was quite under the weather. My sister was struggling and kind of, well, to be transparent, dropping out of college at the time. So my mom actually was like, I was living alone. I was like, oh, my mom's like, oh, well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I'm going to go move with Mara. And I just like got so sick and then finally collapsed on the basketball court. And so I remember like the actual feeling of getting insulin in my body and just being like, oh my gosh, I'm alive again. And I think like from that moment, because like I was like a heavy set kid growing up, I was actually like 11 pounds, 12 ounces when I was born. So I was just like I guess, I don't know how to say it. Like my genetics and my DNA is hardy. And so when I was in 7th grade, I joined the volleyball team. We moved from Woodbury, Minnesota to central Wisconsin, to a really small high school. And I could like make it on the sports teams. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. They had tryouts in Woodbury and now everyone can join volleyball. And the coach made us run a mile. And imagine like I'm a like adolescent girl, I'm overweight. I had stretch marks in kindergarten. The like idea of having to run a mile, like 4 laps around the track with all of the high school volleyball players was horrifying to me. I remember it being like very traumatic for me. I was so humiliated and embarrassed that it took me like 20 minutes to get the mile done. And it only took them, I don't know, what's 8 or 9 minutes, like young, healthy gals. And I remember like just always kind of having like, not like I'm going to prove them wrong. Maybe like put I don't know, it's like, it lit a fire underneath me. And so, yeah, I was diagnosed with diabetes. Before I was diagnosed with diabetes, I like threw shot put. I was quite athletic. And after you lose that much weight and have that significant of a change as a human, not only were my athletic abilities greatly altered, but like socially, it was so new to me to be 120 pounds as a young girl versus 200 pounds. And so I remember I was voted on prom court like junior year before I got diagnosed, and I couldn't find a prom date. And then senior year, after I had slimmed down, I did have multiple suitors. And so in order to just be like, you know what, I'm good, I went with someone I mentored who had Down syndrome. Now I actually coach Special Olympics as well. So I'm really passionate about folks with different abilities. But I feel that one of the things about diabetes that I dislike the most, or that I feel really strongly about, is that there's a negative connotation associated with folks with diabetes. Like I've done something wrong, or I was overweight, so like that's why I have to deal with this the rest of my life. And so yeah, I just feel really strongly that although diabetes is not, it's incredibly challenging to manage, like technology gets better every single day. And it's just really important for people to understand what it is. Like the amount of times you hear people like, one time I like was asked if my insulin pump was like a gun. Like people are just like, don't know, but it's like, someone's like, oh, my aunt's sister's brother's ex-boyfriend had diabetes. And I'm like, oh, LOL, that's great. I mean, I'm sure you know so much about diabetes. But yeah, it's just something that I think I was always out to prove folks wrong about. So after I went to college in Minnesota at the U and then moved to New York right after I graduated. And I worked at a small startup before I'm working at Amazon. And Amazon's office at the time was 5 blocks south of Central Park. Amazon was a rigorous professional experience, to say the least. And I was quite homesick for the Midwest at the time. So I would like just go to Central Park and like grab a bite to eat. And anyone that I would see with like any Midwest swag, I was like, oh, it's just like Northwestern, that's in Chicago. Oh my gosh, you guys just talked to me and be kind to me. And then eventually I was like, I was like, just like runners were just always beautiful people. There was always like some camaraderie I felt within runners. Like I would see them like waving to one another. And I was like, now might be the time that I'm going to get back at Mrs. Madsen, the volleyball coach. I hope she's well, no bad vibes towards her. But I just like put on my shoes and during my lunch breaks at Amazon, just started like clearing my head and getting some miles in. I would go into the bathroom and I would have like wet wipes in my bag and like try to like freshen up and put back on my heels. And like before I knew it, I could run like 3 or 4 miles. And I was like, wow, like I'm like, like making it up almost to like 100. Like, and I'm like, that's like good for me. And then I don't know, it was like a trigger or something. And I got an email to sign up for the New York City Marathon. And I was like, you know what? Why not? This is great. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe not. Either way, like I don't have anything to lose. And it's a lottery. So then I learned that the lottery is super competitive. So I ended up doing it for charity and I raised money for Special Olympics and got in. And it was just something that I found a lot of joy in. But also there was a number of folks that were like, oh, as a diabetic, it's hard. Even my like endocrinologist was like, well, like, I don't know. It's like, it definitely has like a gluconic impact. What's like the technical way of saying like it has an impact on your glucose. However, like living in New York sorry, what is the technical way to say
Well, glycemic or glucogenic, but probably glycemic impact.
glycemic? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So when you just started running those 3-4 miles, any things that you kind of ran into with Alzheimer's diabetes, right when you got into that, or was that pretty good anyways? I mean, were your blood sugars pretty stable? Were you tanking, or kind of how did that start out initially?
So I think like the difference between running like 3 or 4 miles and like 20 miles, or I don't know if I shared, Brett, but I ran 2 marathons on 2 continents in 2 days. So at that point of time, I'm logging like 70-mile weeks, like almost like flirting with ultra training. And at that point of time, like you're really, really mindful, especially like I'm getting up to 10 miles. Like you have to have the anticipation of there being at least 1 or 2 notable drops during that time. So I just carry like gels, but also like glucose. In New York, it's a gift because there's always a deli or bodega like around that's open. So I can just like go in and get some juice or
Food.
something. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Just for layperson like me, kind of running, sometimes just a mile or two is kind of a stretch. And I'm like, I better have something because sometimes you go from sedentary to doing that, it can just tank. So yeah, we'll let you get into all those longer runs, but makes sense.
There's also like as a woman, there's a lot of like hormonal things that will like impact you. Running is like this very weird thing where some days you wake up and you're like, it's like being a human, right? Like some days we wake up and we're like, hey, my head's clear. I like it. What makes it like I'm just feeling great. And some days you wake up and you like, oh, these miles, I like don't even know how I'm gonna get through that. And it kind of is the same with diabetes. Like it's kind of just a shake of the dice. I'll have runs where I'll like turn my basal down. I'll like be at and as you continue running, like and you like get mileage in, you have to like take less and less and less. But another thing that I got at some point of time was like the sensor, and that was tough to keep in, like sweat, obviously. So then I fought insurance to get like more sensors because I was going through them. Like they're supposed to last, I think, like 6 days, and they would last like a day and a half or 2 days. So there's a lot, like quite a few things to consider, but you always have to consider at that juncture. Even I guess like 10 miles is aggressive. Even when you're like running 5 miles, and plus you have to consider at least one drop. And if you don't have one drop, then that's, I think, just a win. Some runners, like I know other runners that have diabetes. I was the first person with a chronic illness to do all 7 continents. But when I was running Amsterdam, I met another girl who did all 4 majors and she was type 1. Like the 4 majors, that's like more competitive running. She like ran Boston and like the qualifiers. And she really like, meet up in an award-winning. Oh, sorry.
No, keep going. Sorry, I just muted someone that just entered.
But her goal and objective was like pacing and like having like very little fluctuation. So if she saw her blood sugar dropping, she would like cut back on her pace. And I didn't do that. That's another really effective way to go about it. So yeah, so I guess like kind of going back and like the traveling piece. So I'm also gonna just like share my screen. So I'll like kind of start. Yeah. Um, I'll like just also start with um hmm, sorry, I don't know what happened. Sorry guys, I'm new to Zoom. It's like my first day using technology. Oh.
Sorry, it's my bad. I should have got on here a little bit earlier with you, let you test this out, but
Mm, oh.
mm.
So I just put together like a little slideshow. Let's see if it'll work. Um, okay. Let me start. Okay, so this is me running New York. So this is in 2016 when I like caught the bug. I had an okay run. It was a great run. Like New York is my city, so the like my fans were all scattered throughout the course. It was a great run. I was also like a little bit younger, so I was a few pounds lighter. That's like an actual fact. I think they say like for every extra 5 pounds you put on your frame, you can anticipate an extra 5 seconds for every pound. So it's like an extra 5 pounds is like it's a lot. If you can lose like 10 pounds before a race, you're gonna like just get through it faster. So I was a little bit thinner. So I had a good run. Um, that being said, before I ran New York, I traveled. So I went to Asia for a year. And that's kind of where the travel bug started. So I spent a year in Asia. Really one of the most painful parts of, I think, being a diabetic for me, because I travel so much. I actually am a little bit jet lagged. I just got back from Bali yesterday. So I'm like, but when you travel, it's a really big hurdle to get diabetes supplies. If I go to Asia for a year, I need to have prior authorizations and diabetes supplies, and Medtronic is going to be really disgruntled, and you have to fight and fight and fight. So actually, on that trip, my ex-partner's mother met us at the 4 month mark in Thailand with diabetes supplies, and my mom met us in Vietnam at the 8 month mark with diabetes supplies. And so I'm so thankful for that. Otherwise, I don't know if I could have quite gotten it done. However, on that trip, I was in a hostel in Cambodia, in the south of Cambodia. And I, before I moved to New York, I traveled Europe and Northern Africa, and I got robbed twice on that trip as well, but no diabetes supplies were taken. So it was great, right? Like, had my diabetes supplies been taken, my parents probably went to the door Asia. They would have been like, you know what, Brianna, stay home, cool your jets. Why don't you like go to Mexico, you know? Um, but yeah, so I'm in a hostel, actually not a hostel. We like splurged and I got like a guest house, like a full on like private bathroom. It was like luxurious. And on the windows, there was like grates, like diamonds. And in the morning, I woke up and there was a bamboo rod like in the window with like a hook on the end. And they had taken my bag to the window and just like pulled out anything that they could. My pump was on me, but everything else was taken. So like my meter, like all my insulin, etc. And super fun fact, I just think this is really like good to know, like as a diabetic, that all US embassies abroad have an emergency stockpile of insulin. So my dad, of course, frantic, because I'm in a small town in southern Cambodia with no insulin, um, was like, I need to call everybody that I can. And actually was like, Brianna, you need to get to Phnom Penh, to the capital, get to the US embassy as fast as possible. And they're going to get insulin for you. And they did. It was a beautiful experience. Like, it was like the world just like hugged me. But I've also learned over time that any country, any pharmacy that you walk up to in the developed world, I think in Europe you do need a prescription, but if you were to like be in Thailand, let's say, and you were to walk up to a pharmacy, you could buy a pen over the counter for probably what your copay is here. So like $10, $15 for the same cost for long acting and short acting. Just something I think that's really good to know, because there's obviously diabetics all over the world. So yeah, after that trip, I just was like, oh, traveling's the best. Then I'd run the marathon. And after running New York, I didn't like know that no diabetic had ever done all 7. But I got an email from Medtronic about like athletics, like just athletes, I think. And there was like a blog, and I really loved my like point of contact at Medtronic. She was great. And then she told me she's like, I don't like running. But then I saw something else like simultaneously at the same time about the 7 Continents Club. And I just sent them a cold email, just like, hey, just out of curiosity, like, have any diabetics ever done this? And they responded pretty promptly that no, in fact, they had never had anyone, male or female, with a chronic health condition that had completed all 7. And then I just inquired, because obviously the big kahuna would be Antarctica. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was like, that would be amazing. Can you imagine? Like that would be so cool. I also, guys, really need to make an important asterisk that like I am extremely privileged, right? Like the fact that I can just like lollygag around Asia and have supplies for 4 months and then just have someone fly over with supplies, like, and I have the disposable time and income to just bebop around the globe and run. It's a big privilege. So like I need to like make that clear. But after knowing that no one had done it, it was just like going back to 7th grade when I couldn't run the marathon, and I was like, or the mile. I was like, I'm gonna show them. This is what I'm gonna do. My endocrine was on the fence about it. She thought it would be okay, but she was quite concerned about just me speaking highly aspirational at that point. At that point, I was like, oh my gosh, and doctor, an ultra marathon in the desert in the Sahara in Northern Africa, there's also never been a diabetic to do the race disables. Have you heard about it? It's self-sustaining, 4 days over the sand. You have to carry anti-venom and you sleep on the sand. And she's like, Brianna, this is wild. Like, please just cool your jets. Like, I can't, no. And so at that point, I was like, I got to do it. That night, I registered for Sydney, got in, and ran it a year and a half later. And here's me in Sydney. It was an okay run. In Sydney, there was a sizable drop in my blood sugar that was hard to bring up. So I walked about a half mile at mile 18, which slowed me down. And I wasn't at this point like a seasoned runner. So, but it was just a really fun, good vibe race. My girlfriend also lived in Australia at the time, so she came to cheer me on and also had provisional snacks. That's another fun fact. The day before a race, I would sometimes, depending, in Marrakesh, I did this in Sydney, I planted and had someone, like you could pay like a task rabbit essentially, to like put snacks along the course. So like in Marrakesh, I had someone put oranges under trees at mile markers because I didn't know if the race would have provisions. And I was like, oh, I like really wanted to race for a better time. And so, but yeah, you can also see on my belt that I have to carry like a ton of stuff because I have to carry my meter. I have to carry an extra IV, an extra sensor in case it falls out. But yeah. Oh yeah, here she was like probably giving me, so she's like, sure. So after this, oh my gosh, my toe. After that race, a month later, I went to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was an okay race as well, not great, and I lost my toenail. That's another issue, is like circulation and your feet, like podiatral health, the health of my
podiatry. You got it.
Podiatry health. Yeah. So that's another thing that my doctor was quite concerned about. I lost a lot of toenails. The fun fact, I guess, is like under toenails is like a kind of a protective second layer toenail. But I would always, like, once I was getting to the point where I was at risk of losing a toenail, I would always sleep with and wear full compression socks. So the entire thing, just to really like encourage my body to retain the nail. Yeah. Oh, this is me running in the Dubai train station, and they're like, this girl, oh my gosh. Okay, so after Amsterdam, so I ran Sydney, Amsterdam, and then right before COVID, I wanted to go after 2-2. It's 2 marathons on 2 continents in 2 days. It just like felt right. This I kept top secret. I never told my endocrinologist. I didn't tell my parents because I knew they would be really worried and stressed out. So I ran Dubai, which is a really fast track. It's a beautiful run. There were tons of really elite runners there trying to qualify for Tokyo. It was 3 weeks before COVID. And I had never trained more in my life. I was probably running 80-mile weeks at this point, because in order to run back-to-back marathons, it's kind of like ultra running. You have to prepare to run 26 miles and then the next day 26 miles. And so I was really putting in the mileage. I had never been in better shape in my life. I land in Dubai 5 days before the race. I'm feeling great. My hotel is lovely. Dubai is great. The food, the weather. Oh my gosh, it felt great. And before bed that night, I get like the first time in my life as a diabetic, the critical pump air 35. I don't know if anybody knows what this means, but it basically means if your pump's dead, it means nothing to you anymore. You have to return it to Medtronic. It's just going to do nothing. They say it's because it's been exposed to some element that could jeopardize their insurance, or it makes it a further liability. So here I am in my hotel in Dubai, and I was like, Mom, Dad, you'd be so proud. I found these pets. And yeah, it was great. It was like the world yet again, just like hugged me. And I don't know if anyone feels this way, but for me as a diabetic, this has happened one other time in like the last 2 years, wherein I was forced to go off my pump and could go back on pens. And I felt like that was kind of liberating. So like some of my girlfriends will joke about like, oh my gosh, my here we dead or lost. Like, oh my gosh, I need my phone, my charger. And I'm like, without my pump, I'm at, like, I was like, I have my pump, it's like, it's something that I'm so emotionally tethered to, that going back to pens for some time made me more able to relate to what the like most experienced diabetic or what most diabetics experience. So yeah, that was beautiful. The next morning though, I was like, I can't be like, it's like, this is just too much. I'm unfamiliar. Like, I think I took too much like long acting, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna learn this? I was trying to like YouTube video, how does a diabetic like use pens? And then I was like, I'm gonna call like my gal pal at Medtronic again, because she's the best. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, like the issue with getting diabetes supplies shipped globally is that a lot of countries, Indonesia being one of them, the Philippines not being one of them. The Philippines is very lenient about shipping like medical devices across country borders, but the UAE, United Arab Emirates, is not going to do it. No medical device. It has to be registered as a medical device to go out of customs in the US, and they will not accept any of that. It's, I guess, like a precaution against smuggling in the UAE, but in like Indonesia and such, they basically just like don't want to lose out on the revenue. So that was a tough pill to swallow. And she's like, but it looks like in Abu Dhabi, I don't know if that's close to you. It looks like it might be kind of close. There's a center funded by Prince, whose son has diabetes, and he has a diabetes education center. So I don't know, maybe she like went above and beyond, found out that they in fact did have a diabetes education center because of how wealthy people of UAE, United Arab Emirates descent are. They're like bloodline, that it's completely free. Like, it's just a diabetes center, a diabetes education center, and you can come as a diabetic and get anything your little heart desires. I was like, sounds too good to be true, but I guess I'll make the journey. It's 3 hours via bus. I guess I get to see the desert. And like, that sounds like a cool cultural experience anyways. I like got my pens. I like stocked up on some like precautionary stuff. I like had my juice, and I like made the journey. And I arrived. Here I am. They gave me a pump for free. Nothing. $0. They were like, here you go. And I was like, oh, do you want my pump with the air? And they were like, no, definitely not. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a dream. They even gave me like this fancy leather carrying case. And yeah, it was amazing. It was like such a gift. Again, like the world just kind of took care of me and held me. I did okay in Dubai. It was like a hot race for me. But then I got on the flight that night after I ran and flew to Marrakesh and PR'd. I had my best race ever in Marrakesh in Morocco, and that was a pristine run. It just couldn't have physically gone better. Like, no matter what I did, it couldn't have gone better. So it was again my best run. I had planted all my oranges along the course. It was like perfect. It was just such a gift. When I was in Dubai, the heat is another variable that I think has to be considered. My IV for my pump fell out. And as like any diabetes, or anyone with diabetes that's managed on pump therapy knows, it's hard to put in your, what is that called? Oh, I'm forgetting the term. The IV when
Infusion set.
infusion set. Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
Amazing. The infusion sets don't love moisture. So that makes it really hard on a course as hot as Dubai. I'm like trying to keep that in. And then it became on the Dubai course, like it was like I was trying to just keep that infusion set in more so than I was focused on my time, which was fine. I did okay. And this was also at a time in which I went from the Medtronic sensor to the implanted sensor in my arm. Has anyone done that? Has anyone used that therapy or heard of it?
Yeah, we've briefly talked about it, but I don't think we have anybody on here that tried Senseonics, the implanted sensor. Have we?
Nope.
Not everybody's here tonight, but it's not just because it's not super compatible with the other ones, and it came a little bit late with the calibrations were happening. So, but
Yeah,
how was it?
yeah, so like again, I endorse any single human being that's trying to progress our disease. I am like, yes, more power to you. I don't care if you try to put like a sensor on the tip of my nose, like Rudolph. I'm gonna like give that a whirl, you know. But for me, it was hard because I'm so athletic and I move so much that the sensor at one point got lost. So it's typically a really like small insertion. So just a local, like they give you a shot, they just like make a little slit, stick that like pill underneath your skin, and then a Band-Aid. And within 3 days, you take it off and the sensor is on it when the Band-Aid is there. It sends a signal to your phone. It doesn't link with your pump. And it was good. But then after this, they couldn't locate it when they went in to remove it. So that was tough. At that juncture, then I went back to Medtronic. And Medtronic gives you like this little adhesive. You can put, it's like not like the normal one, but then they give you like an extra one. But that wasn't great. I at that point started trying to like look at different types of adhesives because I was like, I knew that Brazil was also going to be a hot run. I was also thinking of doing Peru, Machu Picchu. And so, yeah, I really struck gold with these one adhesives. If anybody wants me to share it with you on Amazon, and it's just like, it makes any sort of like your infusion set as well, just stay in regardless of how much moisture it's exposed to. And I feel like that was like a game changer for me personally. And so, yeah. I would rather have like the self-inserted sensor with like really, really strong athletic adhesive versus the implanted one.
Can you take us through? I mean, we're not trying to be competitive here, but I think maybe a couple of us are curious about your times, like times per mile, your overall times. What did you start at for your races, and what did you get to?
So I got to like 4 as was my PR. So I'm not running for time. I'm never going to qualify for Boston. I think in New York, I started at like 4:20, 4:22. And then I PR'd I made like 4 hours and 30 some seconds.
Okay.
So so it's not a terrible run, but yeah. It's definitely never going to qualify me for Boston. I'm never going to be like an elite timed runner.
Yeah, that's still very, very impressive for me. So just was curious kind of what the timing.
Yeah. Antarctica, which I guess I'll get to in a second. Oh, here's me.
So have you learned a lot of languages along the way?
I speak Spanish conversationally in Tagalog. Filipino. I know a little Arabic, like conversational Arabic, and Hindi. I speak actually conversational Hindi, but for whatever reason, I feel like Arabic is a challenging language. Like, yeah. So uh, then there was this other photo that I added of this or me training and running during COVID. I don't know if anyone experienced this, but during COVID, runners had a lot of conversation about whether or not running was irresponsible because of like the breathing, especially in a dense urban environment. There was some talk within the running community that it's not sensitive to run. It's selfish to run because you're like breathing, and nobody really knew at this time like what was the cause. So COVID happened, I think March. Yeah, March. And my birthday is April 4th. And typically, like in New York, I live in Brooklyn. So one of my favorite things to do to like go for like a mid or like a long run is to run like over one of the bridges, Williamsburg or the Brooklyn Bridge. And then I would run up either to like Harlem, like the Bronx Yankee Stadium, or like Times Square. I know Times Square is kitschy, but it's just like a solid, like, I know exactly it's like 6 miles there, 6 miles back, and it's like pristine. So on my birthday, April 4th, I had been in my apartment alone with my cat for 3.5 weeks. And I was like, on my birthday, I'm treating myself. I'm not going to be irresponsible and risk killing my fellow New Yorkers. But at 10 o'clock p.m., I'm going to just do it. I'm not going to tell anyone. It's going to be my secret. And I'm going to run to Times Square. And I did. I ran to Times Square and I got there like just after midnight and I was alone. There was not a soul in Times Square. It was like a very emotional moment, like of just me like having all of this gratitude for running and um, just being healthy. And like, I felt so sad and devastated for my city and just like the world and what we were all suffering with at that time. But then over the like following few months, and as we kind of learned that maybe it isn't as irresponsible to run, at least if you do run, just like avoid other people when you see them, just like try to run away from them, avoid them. But I found like so much gratitude for running. Like I'm a type A personality, and so I'm a bit tightly wound, and running really allows me to clear my head in a really productive way. So without running, I feel not my best. Just like some training pictures. A fun hack that I like learned is because when you run a lot, like you're sweaty and it's hard to like carry like an extra jacket. So if you're like sweaty, you get done with a long run. I'm like, I've run 16 miles. I'm in the North Bronx. I got to get the subway home to Brooklyn. And I would go into a bodega, like a deli, and I'd be like, oh, could I pay for just one garbage bag? I just need one garbage bag. And of course they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. Another fun fact is like, there's like every human being in Minnesota, in California, no matter where you are, like on planet Earth, if you like ask someone, and I never like abuse being a diabetic, but if you ask someone like, oh my gosh, like, do you happen to have like a granola bar or anything to eat? Like everyone is always going to help you out. You would rarely have to say like, I actually have type 1 diabetes, so I need to eat something. And so, yeah, like there multiple times, like I never had money, or I didn't have money, or like it slipped out of my pocket, or I like saw someone that was like homeless and I gave them my like diabetes, like emergency money. But everyone in New York always felt like they lifted me up and always, were there for me. So I rarely had to give them the dollar or two for the garbage bag, but it was just like so good to be like, I just ran 14 miles and this guy gave me a garbage bag and now I'm warm. My family loved coming to see me and support me. Yeah, running in the elements was also like tough. It was like a challenge at times because just like the inclement weather conditions, moisture plus diabetes, like not always the best. And then I went to Rio after COVID, and yeah, didn't have the best run for whatever reason. My blood sugar just perpetually low from about mile 14 to mile 22. And it slowed me down quite a bit. And Rio, ironically, had very few stops. So typically, I think there's marathons, the majors anyways, will have a stop every 2 miles. But Rio had pretty effectively, I think, 2 or 3 tables throughout the entire race. And the last table, there was nothing left. Really tough, a tough run. So I didn't have a great finish time, but it was a fun race, and Rio's beautiful, super, super duper hot.
Do you ever shut your pump off quite a bit during your run? And I imagine you did that for the whole pump and you still couldn't get up after lots of carbs, huh?
100%. Yeah, it didn't matter how much I ate during that run. I also just like a little fun fact. Sorry, guys, maybe plug your ears, but I had my period. That's a huge factor. If I have my period, my blood sugar is just astronomically more unpredictable. Um, and I think just on that, but for whatever reason, that day just shook the dice, and my sugar was just like, I'm not going to cooperate and behave. And in that instance, I actually got so desperate, I was asking other runners for their like gels. Most runners will have energy gels with them. And that's a terrible thing if you're a runner to be like, oh yeah, I know you just ran 16 and a half miles, sir, but do you mind giving me that gel? And they'd be like, oh, sure. Like, and some people would just be like so awkward and like they would like do that. But yeah, it was just a challenging-ish run. I had taken my pump off, and I think at that point I even had it in my belt, like not even connected to me at all. Um, very early on, like with like 5 or 6 miles, I had to take my pump off, or I suspend it sometimes, like just to give myself a chance to. Rio was an okay run here. Oh no, Rio, what? I know that was my Medtronic sensor I put in my arm. Do any of you guys put your sensor in your arm?
Almost
Yeah,
exclusively in my arm, yeah.
you do. Yeah. Oh, and you do have the patch, the adhesive.
Yeah, with the stim patches,
Mm-hmm.
7 gram.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Does it ever fall out for you? It's good.
Actually, truth be told, I'm like trialing the Medtronic pump. So this is actually the first patch I've used on their sensor. So I have very limited, literally about 6 hours worth of experience with this patch. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then Antarctica. So fun fact, if I wasn't diabetic, I probably wouldn't have qualified for Antarctica or gotten into the race. It's a really competitive race. Only 50 runners get to do it each year. And during COVID, it was even more competitive. We lost 11 runners before we took off to run. So COVID was just rampant throughout the boat. In order to go and like run in Antarctica, it's quite expensive. It's costly. This is another thing that I felt really spiritually conflicted about. As a privileged human that had just like gallivanted around the world, it felt I had explored like sponsorship. Patagonia gave me some free stuff just because I love Patagonia, and I like know the gal at like my local Patagonia store, and she's like, oh, and as you can see, this is my Patagonia jacket that Patagonia gave me, and they like repaired it for me. I had like a little hole in it, and they like patched it with this green one. Oh, so amazing. But I felt really conflicted about taking resources from like Medtronic, let's say, or like the ADA that could go to bettering our disease and like furthering research or helping folks that are, yeah, greater need. So I didn't fulfill any sponsorship for the race. Running in Antarctica for the marathon is 25 grand, $25,000. So it's costly and different. I was the youngest person who went because typically folks that run Antarctica, they kind of save for it throughout their careers or lives. And so, yeah, you fly into Buenos Aires in Argentina. We had a lot of group runs, a lot of just like conditioning. They kind of like vet you to see if like does this runner have like the chops to make it? Are they actually as strong as they claimed when they applied and got in? A lot of other runners will do like 100 countries, or this is like their 7th continent or something like that, which they try to use to leverage getting accepted for the registration. And I think only like 2 or 3 didn't make it past Buenos Aires. So we did a lot of group runs, just kind of like got in the headspace to go. And then you fly from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia, like the very tip of South America. And then from Ushuaia, we took like a day tour of kind of the Patagonia region before getting on the boat. And this was a little bit dramatic, to be honest with you, because I had submitted a lot of requests that in my room, in our mini refrigerator, there would be juice and sugary precautions because I couldn't fly with anything liquid. And typically for me, it's harder, it's more challenging, sometimes, not always, to manage my low blood sugars at night without something that's liquid, just because it's like I'm like half asleep. It's like now I have to like chew these like fruit snacks or whatever. And so I got on the boat, and also I paid a little bit extra to have like a private room, but they were like, surprise, this is your roommate. And I was like, oh my gosh, she was like lovely and it was fine. But now I'm like, oh, sorry to be bad vibes, but there's supposed to be a lot of like sugary liquid in this fridge and there's none. So I like had to be like, oh, I really, really need this. And I was like, I actually do need this. And so then I like had like a few friends there that were actually Filipinos, like Filipino folks work a lot on the cruise ships. And I was like speaking in Tagalog, and I was like, can you please like have the boat stop? I'm gonna run. I promise I'm gonna run to a convenience store back in Ushuaia, and I'm gonna get like a bunch of stuff that we can put in this fridge that like is supposed to be there. And then yeah, I like was like literally running back, and they were like lifting up like the gateway to like the ship. I was like, no. And yeah, then by the time we got to Antarctica, 8 more folks had been tested positive for COVID. So for 4 days, as we were passing through the Drake Passage, we pretty much couldn't leave our rooms, which was tough because it's like we needed to cross train, and just like you're in a tiny cabin. It was hard, but not as hard as the way back, where I felt like I was going to actually die through the Drake Passage. So I felt good. By the time we got to Antarctica, my roommate was great. She like found a way to like move the furniture around, and we literally just would like cross train and like try to do like sit-ups and stuff like that, like do anything, just move our legs around in the room. But I was suffering quite a bit from cabin fever at this time, to be quite honest with you. And we could only get the food that was delivered like to our door. And so there was very little control that I had. So I would have to get the food, see the food, give my insulin. And another thing that I still am really working on, because I feel like when I was first diagnosed with diabetes, I would get lazy with the timing of giving my boluses. So maybe it was also like social pressure, wherein I was just like, I was young and I didn't want to like take out my pump, or I couldn't think or anticipate like what I was going to have to eat 15 minutes from that time. So I would just like look at what I was going to eat, and then I would immediately give the insulin, and it would like raise my sugar, and then it would like drop my sugar. And so at that time, I was really trying to be more cognizant or intentional about like the timing. So it was like, ugh, so rough. It's already half cold, this food, and now I'm has to sit here for like another 15 minutes. And so yeah, by the time we got to Antarctica, I was like, praise be, like, get me off this boat. As you can see,
How long did it take you for that ship ride?
4 days, 3.5
Wow.
days.
Was it really wavy too? Was there people getting seasick?
So yeah, that's like the story for the way back. On the way
Oh,
back,
sorry.
the swell on the way back was 15 meters, over 40 feet. The entire ship was rocking. I was on the 6th floor. Water was like covering my window back and forth for 22 hours. Finally, I was in the bathroom, squeezed between the like toilet and the wall, writing a goodbye letter to my dad. It was so bad, but on the way down, it felt pretty good. Just like a little bit of Dramamine. And yeah, but by the time we got to Antarctica, it was like, oh, thank goodness. When you're in Antarctica, you sleep on the boat. So there's no hotels, there's nothing like that. This is actually where we ran. So as you can see, this is actually the founder of IATICA, the International Tour Operators of Antarctica Association or something. And he's just there to regulate. In 2012, one runner left a power bar wrapper on the course, one power bar wrapper, and we were on probation for 25 years. So because of that one power bar wrapper, they're so strict about preservation in Antarctica. Because of that, there could never be a runner out of line sight of one of the researchers. So as you can see here, these are all research bases. Like here's like a Russian Orthodox church. So there's research bases all over in this one area of Antarctica, which is pretty effectively like, this is where the airport is. This is like where everybody checks into Antarctica. And then they get on a jitney, like one of the blow up boats, and go back to their boat to sleep. But as you can see, I showed up. I'm from Minnesota. I was like, this weather is great. If this is pristine, like my roommate from Florida was struggling, but I was like, girlfriend, it's nothing. The terrain was mixed. I had brought yak clamps, like straps to put on the bottom of my shoes in case the terrain was that we had a storm, but we didn't, and the course was perfect. It's a little awkward, I'll be honest. I was the youngest person on the trip, and all the researchers, except like a few, were men. And so you can imagine, like, every, like, not a few feet, but like within line sight, there was always like a researcher that would be like, and I like, you have to be polite and kind to all of them because they're beautiful humans as well, and they just are isolated in nature. I remember the Mongolian researcher was so funny, and he actually invited me back to his like research station. I was like, but that was just also a cute, fun part of the race. And they were so lovely. I had precautions throughout the course that I like baggied and I labeled, like, please put this at mile marker X. So running as a diabetic just takes more steps and like emotional bandwidth, probably just like living life, right? It's like being a diabetic, it's just extra. It's just a lot. You have to think about extra things. You have to like live in a different way. Your relationship with food is completely different. Like your relationship with traveling, packing. It's like, what wouldn't I give to not have to have this purse? Like my girlfriend's, like, there was like I don't know, like a year ago, it was like so hip to have these tiny purses. And I was like, ugh, like that must be nice. And so, yeah, in Antarctica, there was just more precautions that needed to be taken. But I had a great run. My time was fantastic. Typically, they'll say you're going to add an hour to your finish time. No, regardless of how great of a runner you are, it's rigorous. The course is extremely hilly, up and down, up and down. And I added on 33 minutes. Felt pretty good about that finish. Then we spent 10 days just exploring Antarctica, like making snow, or like snow angels with penguins, just all of the things. And I don't know who reached out to me, but someone reached out to me about raising money for Canadian diabetics. And so it was really beautiful to have their support, and everybody like on the boat donated, and it was really, really beautiful. And then, yeah, I joined the 7 Continents Club, which was obviously nothing short of an honor and privilege. Yeah.
What,
and,
what was the temperature kind of ranging from and to?
So the day of the race was the hottest day of the trip. So I think it was like definitely below 0. The wind chill was, to be honest, I don't know. I can't tell you, because I think they calculated it in Celsius. So I think, what would it be, like -15 Fahrenheit? What is that in Celsius?
Oh, -15. And do you mean they probably told you Celsius, right? So -15 in Celsius. Yeah. So that Fahrenheit, I think, would be close to 10 or maybe 5, probably 5 degrees.
Google says, yeah, 5 in Fahrenheit.
Gotcha. That's probably the trickiest conversion and stuff I've ever run into. But
It was
Were
amazing.
most people running this marathon, were most people qualifying for that 7 continent accolade? Because I'd imagine this is the hardest continent to run a marathon on.
It is. So actually, there were less than 10 folks that joined the 7 Continents Club. Some people ran at Antarctica like as their 5th continent. Ironically, there's just a lot of people that love running and are passionate about running and just like want to go to Antarctica. One woman, like my roommate, it was her first marathon ever. They also have a half marathon. So they allow 100 travelers, so 50 spectators and 50 runners. And I think only 30 ran the full, or 30 ran the full, and then it's like 7 not even 17, because 11 people were quarantined at the time, so like less than 10. Right? Like it was really, we had to get COVID tests every day. And then there was an announcement like 3 staff and 2 additional travelers will be quarantined. And then if your roommate got quarantined, then you had to move out. And then you would have to be like in a tripod room. And then you had to move in with these people who were like, oh, geez, like now you're going to get it. Was just like very tense. So I was like, oh my gosh, if I just like came all of this way and I can't run, that would be so horrible. But then we found out that the people that were quarantined and got COVID were allowed to run the next year for free. So that's really cool.
Oh, nice. I'm curious, what kind of food do they serve to, or I guess on the whole trip through Antarctica? Because I'm sure it's all kinds of people there and
So on the way down, the food was terrible, served under our door. But after we ran, then there was not, we weren't quarantined. So we could freely walk throughout the vessel. We got on the blow up boats, went onto the island for excursions. Every day we went into Antarctica for excursions. And it was like incredible. And it was like a luxury boat. It was actually a Russian research vessel that was brand new, which is the reason why I had to just have like my roommate, which I was fine with. She was lovely, but there was a lot of Russian influenced food, but it's a luxury experience. So it's like any cruise ship. It's like a buffet. And you could kind of like pick and choose, which I think always works well as a diabetic.
yeah. Cool.
What
Yeah.
month and year were you down there, Brianna?
January, so that's the middle of the summer. It's the hottest week of it.
Was there a lot of sunlight, or how was it? Was it just kind of, light throughout the whole entire day, or?
Yeah, so it's pretty light. Like I think, yeah, like there's because it's like extreme. So I think it was like 3.5 hours, maybe not even. And on the boat, like I think this is also really interesting. Like on the boat, the amount of like energy and passion that goes into like conservation in Antarctica is like wild. So there were 10 staff members on the boat that spend half of their year in the Antarctic and half of their year in the Arctic. And they just educate us. So they did a ton of seminars on like this one species of penguins, or they're doing so much research. And it was fascinating to learn how they're tracking and monitoring the wildlife, and they're tracking and monitoring the glacial fall off and what impact global warming is having, all the while kind of under their breath being like, we hate all of you because tourism is what's like hurting our like glaciers the most. But yeah, like the fact that like one power bar rapper put them on probation for 25 years, I think is a testimony to how seriously they take conservation and just preserving the resources. And yeah, like then after obviously that long, we got back on the boat, and the way through the Drake Passage on the way home was outrageous, like nothing you could imagine. I was preparing to not come home. It was so traumatic. I couldn't listen to even Drake, the music artist, for like 6 months. I was like, oh my gosh, too soon. And I had to get 3 injections for extreme seasickness. The lead researcher on the vessel, he's like kind of like a Viking. He had like a big long beard, and he actually like for years would only be in the Antarctic. So through the winter, staying in a research station in the Antarctic is like extreme. Very few researchers are there throughout the winter, but he was, and he said he had only seen the swell higher 1 time in his entire life. And the entire time the sirens were going off, the alarm system, or not the entire time. I guess it started like an hour after it getting really, really intense, but we couldn't understand what the like alarms were saying. And just like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. But yeah, it's like as a diabetic, the shot wasn't an issue for me. I was like, oh, one little beacon of light. But I couldn't keep food down. And so that was quite scary as well. So they had glucagon shot, but it was actually more effective for me to just take glucagon pills, I think, because the glucagon shot was expired for like years and years, I think. I was like, yeah. And so after 22 long hours, it finally settled wave after wave. And I made it home. And yeah, I'm running the New York City half on March 17th, but I haven't ran a full since. But I think I'm going to register for the Sables, the ultra marathon in the Sahara in 2 years from now. So to be continued. That's a whole nother level of extreme though, because they do take it very seriously because people actually do die. So that will have to be like another to follow up on.
What country is that in for the Sahara?
Morocco.
Okay, nice. And you're pretty familiar. You've been in that neck of the woods, it sounds like.
Yeah, this is like, you can't, I don't think like Marrakesh, like urban running, like road running, like running on the concrete is quite easy. I think like compared to like sand running and ultraing. I don't know if anyone like knows much about ultra culture, but ultraing isn't for time at all. So ultra marathoning is quite literally just to finish. I think it's like 80 miles, maybe like 100 miles over like 5 days through the Sahara. And you have to carry everything except your water. So you carry everything. You have to, and they're so concerned with people dying because people actually do die. So they check you every night before you like sleep on the sand to make sure you have like your anti-venom and all of your emergency things. So that's another variable because my friend John Mark knows the man who founded the Race Disables, and he said they might barter with me. So they might say, as long as you sleep next to someone with the anti-venom, because there's a lot of like snakes and like big tarantulas and stuff that like can get in your sleeping bag or tent. They might say like, okay, Brianna, if you don't have to carry the anti-venom because you have to carry all these diabetes supplies. So we'll see, to be continued. But you sleep on the sand, carry your own sleeping bag, carry all your food, and run like maybe 20 or 25 miles a day. And it's a brutal, ruthless endeavor.
I'm curious, what's your plan for keeping insulin cool throughout the whole thing? Or do you plan on using a pump? Because that's another kind of tricky variable with the heat.
Yes, actually, this is really interesting. I think that as what I can tell, like I have to increase, I just have to give more insulin for every week that my insulin's out of the fridge. But it's better for me to not risk it being taken in like a dry ice bag, or even I would put it on ice sometimes, and then the temperature would like warm up, and then I'd put it back in the fridge. And I think that has a worse impact on the potency of the insulin.
Like it going like hot and then cold and hot and cold.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you seen those bags that get cooler if you put like water on them?
Yeah. I'm on the fence about those.
I know. I don't know much about them either, but
I just haven't found any that I'm like, I trust this. I think for me, just because of the Cambodia experience, like I know I tried to like brush that off as like, oh, it's on the embassy, but like I was like, oh my gosh, like I do not have insulin. And it was really like a complex thing to process. I'm also a vegetarian. That's another really difficult fact of all this, because the normal thing to do would be like, oh, well, just eat like chicken and cheese or something like that. And I'm like, well, I know like my dad's always like, I can't deal with this like plant-based chatter right now. Like if you, this is crazy because I'm choosing to be a vegetarian. This is like, if I had to eat meat and it was like all I could like sustain without carbohydrates, I would figure that out. But I think I always want to have like the worst case scenario in mind. I don't want to be like, oh, my insulin is going to like stay freezing cold throughout this whole trip. I'm like, no, I'm going to like see how long it can last and how potent I can keep it for like 3 weeks outside of any refrigeration. And then I'm going to just try to like find a new vial if possible, or like just have the calculation of like, because it definitely every week it gets less potent. Every day that it's not refrigerated, it's going to get less potent. But I've just kind of done the math and never suffered that much.
gotcha.
Yeah. Test strips, guys, one like fun fact, test strips are really, really costly in Western Europe, more so sometimes than they are in the US. In Paris, I just had to buy strips and I was like, oh my gosh, this is.
Have you ever gone to their local brand and done the millimoles per deciliter instead of milligrams per deciliter?
Tell me more. It's such a fun fact.
I think I was paying up the wazoo too for One Touch Ultras when I was in Asia for a while. And it wasn't quite $1 per strip, but it was good. 60, 80 cents to do that. But I kind of just, in hindsight, I should have been like, okay, what are your strips? And done the conversion, because a lot of these places do the millimoles per deciliter, and you can probably find some cheaper ones. But yeah, some of those American brand ones are pretty expensive too. So I haven't tried it. I haven't done that myself, but it's hindsight now. It's kind of like, okay, I could have went with one of their brands, instead.
Mm.
Mhm.
Else, other questions or suggestions, ways that things that you've experienced?
I'm curious in general, after you run a marathon, what kinds of things are you eating to kind of like replenish, especially when you did like kind of the 2 days back to back? Because obviously that's a lot of like an energy expenditure. And how do you bolus differently, I guess, if you've just run a marathon versus if you haven't ran for a while?
I almost like even after just like a race, on race day, there's going to be like a lot of endorphins. So it's never going to be like predictable. I would just always have to be really mindful of where I'm at after the race, to know if like I am going to have a depletion of sugar or if I'm going to like be okay. But I always will have the sugar-free electrolyte powder, like always, no matter what. Like that's like must. I pretty much always have like a Gatorade Zero next to me, and it's a really big conflict. I talked to my therapist about like my confliction with like the plastic. I know it's like it's like really bad. I'm working on it. But I do also always have like a lean protein. So I eat like a ton of chickpeas. Probably eat like on average week like 5 dozen egg whites. I like eat a ton of egg whites. It's probably like the most. It's just like I eat the most eggs, hands down. I also try to bring peanut butter. It's like something that I think is really, really helpful. I don't like carbo loading. I just don't believe in it. I think there's also like everything about running is like very spiritual. Like if you have a bad experience with something, you're going to be like, I'm never doing that again. Also, maybe that's as a diabetic. Like I will pretty much not smell maple syrup ever. Like I will never look at it. It's like the one thing that I like had a terrible experience with high blood sugar and I'm like, oh, never. Um, but because I just had a great salad before I ran Marrakesh in the airport, I typically will just eat a salad before a long run, and afterwards I'll like have like a lot of heavy protein. There's also like recovery bars, like the recovery stuff. Like I just get them at Costco, like recoveries, like protein powders and that sort of thing. I always try to like implement new things and like see what works and what doesn't, but across the board, like you just like need as many electrolytes as possible, I think.
It's
Are you
interesting
doing?
you don't do the carb loading thing because I was going to ask that too because I don't know a ton about running, but I know that's what marathon runners always do.
Yeah, I think
Actually,
that. Go
my
ahead.
friend in Australia made me carbo load, and I didn't have a great run. I was like, Austin, this is your fault. What were you going to say, Brett? I interrupted you.
No, no, it's all good. I was wondering, your recovery, does that consist of ice baths? I mean, you seem pretty natural, so I don't know if you're doing ibuprofen or Tylenol, you know, any other therapeutics that you're using there.
Yeah, so I try to so hair loss is a big thing when you're running that much. Um, Also restless RLS, restless leg syndrome. It's so difficult. There'd also be days after I would run like a 20 or 22. I never trained like if I was just sort of like doing a 26er, I would never like run more than 22. I know some people are like, oh, you have to get up to 24. I like this. But if you run 22 miles, you need to get 13 or 14 hours of sleep. You'll just continue to sleep and sleep. It's like exhaustion. Like it's a like scientific thing, I think, but restless leg syndrome, like your leg muscles are just like recovering. And so they need time to repair. I always would sleep in compression socks to just help with circulation. Um, but yeah, like I think that running and marathoning is something that everyone has a different experience with. Um, for example, like I also do like the rollers, rolling, like muscle rolling is like critical for me. When your like muscles are repairing, this is another thing that I'm religious about. Like I heard this on a runner's podcast, and I do believe that the secret to like distance running is not necessarily mileage. Like I ran the Brooklyn half, and I think I got up to like 7 miles. I think there is like some muscle memory. It's like riding a bike, but I think that the like muscle recovery um, process requires you to just do it consistently. If you spend 2 days off, like you take 2 consecutive rest days and then you come back, you'll be like where you were 3 miles back, versus if you go like even like 2 days on, 1 day off, or even every other day is better. You just don't want to spend 48 hours not like building up those muscles, in my opinion. It's just as far as like, it never is like breathing. For me, it's just like my legs just get tired if I'm not like quite there yet. Also,
Never
you can,
used.
sorry, one more thing.
Go ahead.
You can train for a half marathon in 2.5 months. You could skip. You don't have to go like this week. I'm going to like max out at my long at like 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10. You can go like 5 and then 7 and feel it out and like feel pretty good. You could also like stack long runs. Like it's different for every runner.
Yeah, there's probably a reason I got punished a week, not even of training for a half marathon, and I've only done 4 miles ever in my life. So I was paying for it with some ice baths and a lot of Tylenol and ibuprofen. But I just find this hard to imagine. You've never used Tylenol, ibuprofen very much at all? Any of that stuff? Aches?
Well, this is the new Brad meeting that he has with the.
I just muted. So you said no?
Probably have taken ibuprofen. Sure, I have. Maybe it's just like for a headache from dehydration more than anything.
Gotcha.
That's
I'm just amazed by your invincibilities and stuff. I was just expecting to do all these marathons, but you got all these world travels and tips and tricks and crazy scenarios that happen, you know, that all of us probably worry about. Is you lose your passport, you get stuff stolen, and what can you do in that case and scenario? You lose the insulin, you know, it's someone's worst nightmare, and it kind of keeps you in a bubble. So I just super appreciate your inspirational story for a lot of people here, and that's what this group is kind of meant to do. Is I've been living with this for how many years? They told me I wouldn't last this long, and just paves the way for the next generation and the next generation. I think we can just feed off this energy. So I really appreciate it. And I also will coax Rick to kind of unmute too, because he's kind of our ultra runner, ultra marathoner, but maybe he's just kind of been in the background eating. So I don't know if Rick's around. He has a lot of questions
Yeah.
usually.
Did I unmute there? Yeah, no, I don't have any questions today. That's I can't imagine doing 7 marathons on 7 continents. I don't think I could afford to do a marathon in New York, let alone 7 continents. I think it must have cost a ton of money to do all that.
I do think at a certain juncture, I started making sizable sacrifices.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really like,
And then I guess just the money and all the planning. Of course, I don't travel much either. So when you're used to the traveling, that part would be easier, I guess. I think more of all the planning than the miles and I mean, all you've gone through to get it all done. That's what's incredible to me.
I do feel quite fortunate. I need to like make clear that like, so I am so fortunate. I have an executive assistant. I now actually have 2 folks supporting me. And a couple of weeks ago, I was quite disgruntled at Blue Cross Blue Shield. I have to pay because I have my own business. And so I pay for insurance out of pocket. We just have to buy insurance off the market. It's ridiculous. And I was like, you know what? Blue Cross rejecting this claim is ridiculous. I was like, Japinder, she's my one of my EAs. I was like, I want a report generated to know how much time you've spent on the phone with Edge Park, my medical distributor, Medtronic, Blue Cross, and let's just throw Dr. St. Louis in there too, LabCorp for blood work. And she's like, oh, Brianna, well, we're on average. I mean, well, because we had to renew the insurance, it looks like it's about 8 hours a week. So it's like, I am so lucky because every time I go away, I was just away for 3 weeks. The timing of my like prescriptions didn't align, and now I'm like fighting with Blue Cross for a prior auth, and it just, they didn't receive the fax, and then I'm like, ugh, they just don't want to buy the strips. It's just like a lot. And so I need to like make clear that I'm like just really privileged and fortunate, because diabetes is an incredibly costly disease to begin
Yeah.
with. And so the fact that I'm able to do this, it can't go unmentioned that I'm really lucky.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of mental and emotional power on your part to go through all that you go through to do that. I know I wouldn't have I can do an ultra here in Minnesota, but I can't imagine going anywhere else to do it. And I know I since I've had diabetes, I can't do those kinds of things. I probably could listening to you, but I don't think I'd chance it because I'm just not used to diabetes.
Of course. And like another thing is like different strokes for different folks. Like there are human beings that are like climbing Mount Everest blind, like with a leg amputated.
Right.
And going to the grocery store and just like smiling at someone, like, why is climbing Mount Everest blind better than like another like win or another like celebrate, like celebration, you know, like as human beings, we're all doing incredible things every single day. So like, I just challenge you, Rick, to be good to yourself.
I think we've been talking with Rick too, doing a little bit of speaking, and you know, he's a little bit humbled. I'm super humbled too, because I thought I had a good presentation way back when about traveling around the world, but you put it all into one, which is amazing. But I think we all have unique, kind of approaches to it, and I think what's really amazing is just all your goodwill too that you have going on. It just seems like that circled around you and came back, to you, because you do a lot of donation, you do a lot of raising, and I know it's kind of tough to state that, but I think other people, it's tough to have those things happen, but it's amazing when the stars align where you get a new pump or something like that, and you're able to connect with these people and really make that deep, meaningful thing where, if everything went hunky dory, you wouldn't have met all these people or people of the culture. And so I think that's just awesome, just to kind of see your free spirit and just going with the flow so much. That's really tough to do, and not having all the control. I just can't fathom though being on that boat so long and having the waves. I would be kissing the ground, and that's probably the biggest nightmare. So I agree with you there.
It's gonna be such a bad way to go. It's gonna be so cold. It was like, oh my gosh, I just, oh, gee whiz.
Hey, Brad, could I make this is Mr. Carol Logan. Brianna, you are incredibly inspiring. And you just, the comments you just made reminded me to how much I respect and admire one of the very best friends I ever had in my life. He's 82 years old. He has run hundreds of marathons. He's done 50-mile runs, 24-hour runs. Yeah, all the he's 82 years old. He has a form of leukemia, and he's had it for decades. I grew up in Vermont. He's a legend in the state of Vermont. He is a beloved man. I don't know if you ever heard of the name Newton Baker. He's a legendary figure in some, he actually holds some international records for running over, doing ultra things at aged over 65. He ran across the country when he was 75. And he collected license plates and stuff along the way. I think they ran 6 days a week, and they ran a marathon distance every day, or something like that. Anyway, you're incredibly inspiring, and you reminded me of a great friend and also a hugely inspiring figure.
I'm humbled.
No, don't be humbled. I'm humbled. My wife has had type 1 diabetes for 18 years, 23 years. Our son has had type 1 diabetes for 51 years. And he started playing soccer. Oh, he had it since he was a year and a half old, but it didn't stop him playing soccer. It didn't stop him playing soccer into his 40s, indoor arena soccer in his 40s,
Um,
which is a very fast, a very, very rigorous game. Anyway, thank you. You are really, you are awesome. You are an inspiration. Thank you.
appreciate that. Feel lucky to be here. I guess like I just also like believe so strong. It's like we're all in this together, you know, like at the end of the day, diabetes sucks. I wish all of your pancreases were producing the exact right amount of insulin naturally, but it's every day it gets easier and better. Like it's like, and that's like the beauty of being a human on this earth, you know, it's like experiencing all of the things. And I lost my best friend to triple negative breast cancer 2.5 years ago. And I remember I was in Australia at the time. I had just broken up with my ex. We were together 10 years. The one whose mom gave me the diabetes supplies in Thailand. And she was just processing a mastectomy. And she, we were at this party and someone asked me, they're like, oh, you're single. Do you take that pump off? What do you do with that pump like when you meet someone? And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Like I'm diabetic. I don't really take it off. If you don't really like my insulin pump, like don't look at me, don't talk to me. You're not my person, right? And Anna just said like hearing that and just being like me or leave me, like this is like who I am and how I am. That was like so inspirational for her. And so I just feel like as a diabetic, like this is a gift to like just relate to the human experience in such a more meaningful way. Cause like, you know, like it's a privilege to have an insulin pump. Like think of all the folks on planet Earth who don't have the technology and the resources that I do. And for those folks, they're, I think, the true heroes here. Mm-hmm. Oh, Cynthia? Oh, some questions. I've had diabetes. I'm 35 and I was diagnosed when I was 16. Anybody else? Any questions whatsoever about diabetes or just like, oh, one other really, really fun fact. I know someone was asking a lot about keeping insulin cold. I believe on airplanes, they're required to allow you to put your insulin in the fridge. If that ever is like going to encourage anyone to like travel. Anything else?
Do you ever use those ultra flasks from time to time or Yetis just to keep things cool? Or do you find that might freeze it too much and the temperature kind of changes? I sometimes do that if I really want to keep it refrigerated while traveling, but I don't know if it keeps it exact is the problem.
Yeah, so I personally, and I know like I don't want to like go out and promote not refrigerating insulin. What I'll do is I'll just fill up the vial, like just this much, like 2 or 3 of them. I don't think a week, as long as it's like less than 7, I don't think there's any impact on the potency. So for me, the risk of it being hot and then cold or like having any variance, I think is, but the Yeti, like ice, even like I've done like a Ziploc baggie before for like just like a quick domestic trip and I feel better about it. But I think Yeti keeps stuff really cool. I have the Yeti cooler and it's amazing.
Yeah, I know you guys were talking about Frio before, and I always thought it, it keeps insulin cold, but it's just more room temperature. It keeps it from getting too hot. And I think I've heard of a lot of people, kind of having mixed reviews about whether they go in the sun and their pump insulin gets too hot. Where me, I think when I go in the sauna and even when it gets up to 100, 140, 160 or something like that, I think my pump does okay. I think my insulin does okay. So I'm kind of fortunate with that. So I think everybody's got different experiences there. So I'm pretty lucky where I think I get a good shelf life of 30 days room temperature as well.
I have a question. You had said once, Brianna, that you use pens, but you didn't use them during a marathon. I know a lot of people like to use pens if they're doing something that's kind of bigger, like a bigger marathon for them or something. But you never did that, right?
No, I've always had a pump.
Okay. Because you went over to somewhere else and got one at that Prince, where that Prince's place was. Boy, was that lucky.
So good. The chandelier in there. I was like, oh my gosh, do you guys have a spare room I can sleep in here? Yeah.
But I think the nice part about it, Rick, is you can turn off all insulin. When you're doing the pens, you can't take out any insulin. So that's the tough part
Right.
is if you start just bleeding insulin, you got to just crush the carbs even more. So it's probably nice that Brianna didn't have, 15, 20 units of Lantus in, that mild
But it's
14.
surprising. At least when I first got diabetes, I just had finished like a couple years before that my 100-mile run, and I remember asking people when I went to conferences and stuff that were famous runners, and almost all of them said they went to pens when they ran long distances. And I kind of thought about it, and I thought, I don't, like you, Brad, that doesn't sound right to me. But you hear that a lot. I mean, you did then. That was 10 years ago. So
Yeah, for my half marathon, I mean, I turned that whole thing off for that 2.5 hours. I mean, I didn't.
yeah.
I had like 11-minute miles, so I didn't train, so I kind of deserved that too. But but it was nice to be able to just turn that off and be like, okay, if I need a little bit of a boost, rather than having to eat tons of food along the way. But I don't do the long running like you guys do, so that's really impressive.
Well, I think maybe what I'm saying is they are using pumps, but they just take along a fast acting insulin pen and don't even bring the pump. So maybe they're kind of doing what you do by turning it off, but they don't have to carry the pump. I'm guessing I don't remember because I just got diabetes and I was just trying to keep my head above water at that time.
Yep, pumps were probably a little bit less common then too. So
Right.
that's
Yeah, exactly.
such a difference in the last 10 years.
I'm kind of curious, during marathons, when you're eating like the orange that you stashed along the way, are you taking any insulin for that, or pretty much all foods while you're running just kind of free, good to go?
I also agree. I sometimes you can set like a temp basal. Sometimes I'll reduce it down and only be taking 15% by mile 5. Like very rarely by mile 10 am I taking anything aside from a bolus if needed. It's just usually a tiny one.
So you really just take like little corrections as you go if it's needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I have the pump that does the auto correction, which is really nice.
You find that temp target works well for running?
I love the temp target. My endocrinologist thinks it's a disaster. Oh, I also supplement my insulin with Afrezza.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
So good. To be honest, that's probably one time I was skiing and my IV came out, and having Afrezza saved my life.
Yeah.
Having that is just a backup. The inhalable is a game changer.
And do you use
it
that while
really-
you're running too?
It corrects pretty quickly. So if I do it, it'll just be a tiny bit. I couldn't even take the full 2-unit cartridge, just half of that.
Gotcha.
Because it will drop you down, I would say 3 to 4 times faster than a normal bolus would.
Gotcha. And maybe that's nice too, because then you have less time to worry about it dropping you low. It's kind of in and out quick.
Yeah. But we all yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I'm tripping in. Have you ever been derailed by high blood sugars in some of your runs? Where they really mess with you? And how high? If you're willing to share.
So I think there was a prep run. I think it was just also snowing and sleeting. I think it was right when I was getting started, trying to train for Amsterdam maybe, and my blood sugar was insanely high and I started throwing up. I don't remember what happened there though. I couldn't remember reasons. That being said, we all have that clogged reservoir, or like, it's like the inevitable as a diabetic, and something that's hard for people to relate to, where like you just wake up and your blood sugar is like 420 and like your eyes are like, I can't hardly see, and you're like exhausted. I don't think that happens as a result of running ever. To me, running doesn't trigger that. That just happens maybe every 6 months, just because I'm a diabetic, and that's just part of the disease. And you can take every precautionary measure possible. That being said, 1 or 2 times maybe before I put the patch on it, my quickset would fall out, and that would happen.
That's understandable. I have a question for you that may be too personal. You don't want to answer, and that's fine. But what do you normally, when you're in training, and I kind of found this out from other people too, and surprised me. What do you let your blood sugars run at during the day? You probably never let them get very low.
I think my like range is set on my pump like from 80 to 150.
Okay. And do you stay in that mostly during the day?
So I have
I mean,
to,
if you're not running, but just normal?
if I'm not running, I mean, typically like my blood sugar is 199 right now. So let's keep it all right. I need to correct right now. However, if I'm going out to run, let's say I'm running more than 5 miles, I have to be at least 150. You can't
Okay.
go out on the run and be at 82, because within a mile you'll be at a bodega drinking down a Welch's grape soda. That's my favorite guilty pleasure. I just love a grape soda.
So
And it's
you
like,
go 150 or higher before you even start.
I have to. Otherwise, I'll just eat like something on like my way out, or
And I think that's pretty typical from people I've asked, that's pretty, they don't want to go low. And you're not going to stay high probably, unless you have a problem with your insert.
to be honest with you, one of the hacks for me running, my business is global recruiting, so I spend a ton of time in Asia. I was just there for 3 weeks, and Manila is not a great city like to run in. It's just really like it's just people don't run there a lot. The roads are very like haphazard, to be generous. The traffic is just ungodly. But one of the things that I think is a beautiful welcome distraction is like bebopping into like a little like corners and just getting like a popsicle. It's like a distraction. It's like something to like keep your mind off the pain, so to speak, you know? And so I think that's a great hack. Like starting out the run with like something, just something to get your mind off it, a distraction. Some like runners run with lollipops. One of the elites, like I think she ran and got 3rd or 4th in Boston. She always will have like Tootsie Rolls. Like, she's just like something to have in her mouth, like just to like keep her mind distracted.
This is incredible. I mean, we took a lot of your time, but yeah, if people have other questions, this is usually where we kind of break it down too. So feel free to chirp in, anyone. We really appreciate your time, Brianna. So if you have to get going, let us know too.
So my time is your time.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of amazed that Medtronic and other people, based on your story, haven't asked you to do some inspirational speaking. I think this is really phenomenal that we're one of the first groups to get you, and really honored by that and spoiled. So we just, yeah, can't thank you enough there.
One of the other things I just want to mention, just because I'm quite passionate, not that I'm not passionate about diabetes. Diabetes really matters, but I am really active in Special Olympics. I actually am the head figure skating coach for New York. And some of our athletes that have different intellectual abilities have diabetes. But you can also run as a guide and get into any marathon. I could qualify for Boston. I think the program's Achilles. So you can like escort a blind runner. And as a diabetic, you can qualify for someone to run with you and carry your supplies. It's a fun fact.
If you have someone do that for you in the desert.
Like, let's go. You just carry all this glucose and put it on my insulin on ice just because. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Uh, I think who's the other like there's like an athlete with type 1 diabetes. Well, there's so many. But I think one of like the elites.
Yeah,
she's
we'd
like
love to.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no,
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I'd be like, we'd love to get your information if you can, inform us when you're looking to do that Sahara one and let us know. I'm sure there's people that are looking to, help fundraise or pitch in too. We just, we're all inspired by that too. So we see someone else, we just want to share that energy and yeah.
Of course. I'm always just here like to chat. Like if you need to vent about diabetes, like it's like not easy. Like I think you guys are like all like brilliant inspirations.
So in Cambodia, was that camp or Kep or Kampot that you were stuck down in, or a different city? I mean, you're probably just like, get me out of here.
No, it's Kep. I think it was Kep. Because
Okay.
that's on the river.
Yeah, those I know they're a little bit more south. I'm just looking at it right now.
Kampot is the one with Angkor Wat.
Mm, Man, they're actually under different names on Google here.
In Cambodian Sanskrit, so
Yeah, I just can't find it, but I went down there for a little bit and
you
had a
did.
bunch of taxi drivers trying to hassle me for money for volleyball and stuff. They didn't know I played collegiately and everything like that, but I was afraid of what teammate they're going to be giving me too. But yeah, I can't. That's just different names there right now, but
It's not, it's Siem Reap, that's Angkor Wat. It's definitely not that.
okay. Oh, you were in Siem Reap when that happened?
Nope, I was in the south, so it wasn't Siem Reap. Siem Reap's I think a pretty big city. We also went out to an island. That would have been worse. Do you remember the island off of Cambodia? It was just like a little ferry ride.
Koh Rong?
Koh Rong, yes. It would have been worse if it was
Or
happening.
Koh Kong, I think. Koh Kong.
They had the like fluorescent thing, like at night when you went like this, then all like the water lit up with like those little fish that were. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
I heard of.
it had to be Camp. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I heard about that going to the Koh Kong or Koh Rong and stuff, but I didn't make it out for that one. So, but
How did you do?
yes,
Did you just keep it on ice?
I bought in India. I bought in Thailand. I just went to the pharmacy. Didn't really need too much of a prescription. In Thailand, I was a little bit worried, so I did go in there. They waived my first exam fee, but then after that, I just went into local pharmacies and they all had cartridges. So I just bought the cartridge holder and I was able just to flip those in. But most of the time they were just per cartridge or pen, anywhere from $5 to, or maybe $3 to $10 each. So it's pretty affordable.
Yeah.
And when I was in Abu Dhabi or Dubai too, I just kind of stopped in a local store, Turkey as well, and it was just about $10, $12 per pen, and you didn't need a prescription. So I found that was like, the biggest barrier to break. You're just scared as can be, or I was when I went go abroad. Like, what am I doing here? But I have this pool of money, and maybe I'll fly back, but that would be the worst idea because then I'd have to go through insurance and pay a higher amount. So it was just really freeing when went traveling and found insulin was a lot of other places, and people are very helpful. I think your stories are absolutely phenomenal too. With getting the pump and insulin at the embassy, that's something I never knew. That's really nice.
When you're abroad, do you guys find similar brands like Novolog, Humalog over there? Or are they totally different but similar insulin?
They have both.
Okay.
I might call it Novo Rapid lots of times. Is the common one over a lot of countries. But yeah, usually Humalog or Novolog are really common. Lantus Glargine. I don't know how Levemir maybe you might find. I think I did bypass in Vietnam when I went to one place. It wasn't maybe the best place, but I think it's U40 insulin or U80 insulin.
Oh.
So I would have had to do the calculations at that
Oh, math,
time.
yeah. Was it still a Novolog Humalog brand, or was it like a totally different thing, the U40, U80?
That one was just kind of just different print on it, and my learning curve was so low at that time. I wasn't a diabetes educator at that time either, so I just didn't really know.
Gotcha.
And so when I knew I didn't see the U100, it was just kind of above my pay grade, and I shied away when it came to it.
Gotcha.
I think they have like they have off-brand insulin manufactured in China that's quite cheap. Like in the Philippines, it's like dollars for the pen. But then they would also have like the name brands. In Eastern Europe, they have Russian insulin. It's really cheap.
And
I'm almost
you,
like to
you don't ask if it has cow or pig insulin in it or anything like that.
we're gonna give it a whirl. I trust this.
You can't donate blood anymore.
Tell me that rule. If
I think they usually ask something about using a really old type of insulin when you're donating blood. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I guess since you're vegetarian, ethically, how would you feel about, yeah, like pig or cow derived insulin? Would you take it?
That's so funny. So I used to host a ton of couch. Does anyone know what couch surfing is? Yeah. So in my old apartment, I basically ran like a free hostel. Like I had a pretty sizable apartment. I went through a really tough breakup and I hosted like hundreds of couch surfers until my building like put a camera outside my door. And I was like away on a work trip and there were like 14 kids all over my apartment. And my super was like, who are all of you? This is crazy. They thought it was like Airbnb. But I would ask these like cards, like just conversation starters. And one of them was